Hi, it's me, Ingrid, INFP. And I've tried to make this video several times. Ironically, because this video was about self-disclosure, I didn't want to expose my friends for any of the self-disclosures that they made. So this video is going to be about self-disclosure and the weight that gets lifted off your shoulders. At the same time, the trust-distrust thing, and how masking is detrimental, but also kind of important. It's just going to be a little bit of a discussion of what happened last weekend. Now, I'm also on my period, so I'm kind of tired. Also, I found out quite a bit of things since last weekend, so which kind of changed my perspective on what was said last weekend with my friends. So basically, I met up several of my friends last weekend. First, I met up with two of my friends, and one of them was my ENTP friend, and the other, then I went to my ENFJ friend's mingle party. Now, I talked to my ISFJ friend and my ENTP friend about, well, first of all, my ENTP friend has been traveling the world pretty much. He's doing work with global health, both in South America and in Africa. So he got us a little carved, like this nut that is carved with animals on it for Christmas. So that was very nice. And yeah, we were talking about my brother and how my brother hasn't really been talking. For some reason, my ENTP friend said, oh, it would be interesting if he has autism, if you could just splice the genes that are responsible for autistic traits, maybe you could change a person so that they wouldn't be autistic. And that's the kind of thought experiments that my ENTP friend likes to make. But I was like, yeah, taking it a little bit personally. I told him, the autistic brain, autism is caused by a variety of genes, and so also the brain's entire development is affected by autism, where you would have micro-connectivity in the small areas and hypo-connectivity in the large highways of the brain. And so you would have to rewire the entire brain, and you can't just, that I know of, you can't just tweak one trait. And he was like, oh, that's a shame. I was like, okay, but if you did that, if you were able to do that, then I wouldn't exist, because I got an autism diagnosis a year ago. And then he said, oh, well, I have autistic traits too. And he said, I think I have autism because other people have told me that I have it, and it all makes sense now. And it was like, oh, wow. So I got to this relief and this sense of belonging. Suddenly I could talk about my special interest with somebody who also knew about autism. He knew about autistic rumination. He knew about, he'd studied this, He knew about ableism. He knew about alexithymia. Like, he knew these certain things, interoception. He's read some of the stuff, So suddenly I was like in the room with somebody else who knew what we were talking about, and that was wonderful. And then my ISFJ friend came and said, oh, well, he said, but autism does not really affect our relationship. And I said, well, actually it does. It does. It's very nice of him to say that he doesn't think that I'm a burden, or that I that my autism causes problems in a relationship or something like that. But it's kind of a false idea, because autism affects everything that I do. And so my diagnosis actually gave me the understanding of like, oh, that's why this happened 5 years ago. That's why you looked at me like that when I said this. It all makes sense. So even if you don't see it, I see it. I see that it affects our relationship in certain ways, and it has only grown more positive having this realization. And my ENTP friends agreed. He said, yeah, there were so many realizations that he's made since then. And yeah, it was wonderful to have all this disclosure with people that I trust, and it leads to wonderful more connection, more discussion, But I had been hiding this from my friend for a year, or more, because it was even before my diagnosis that I'd suspected. So there was all that. Then we started talking about the queer experience and how, accepting being queer, being gay, how that's similar to being autistic. We talked about how, just being yourself, sometimes disclosure can be dangerous. You have to be careful who you disclose to, who you can trust. I told them about how when I came out, I actually knew, I came out to my workplace, but I haven't come out to my family. I came out to my co-workers because I knew that they had accepted another person who was gay at my workplace. I also knew that I had seen several of them at Pride. I also knew that I trusted them with my mental health since before, where, I didn't have a choice about disclosing about my burnout because, I was away from work and that kind of thing, so people knew. And yet they treated me the same, and it was positive experience. People were compassionate towards me. So I felt like I could disclose with my coworkers, but it's not something that I would recommend people to do. I wouldn't recommend people to disclose that they're gay or that they're autistic at their workplace. I'm not out as autistic to most people at my workplace, because I've had mixed bag of responses. But some people might feel like it's totally okay to be autistic at their workplace and not okay to be gay. I don't know what workplace that would be. There are certain places, certain people that you can trust and certain that you can't, and it's important to make that distinction. It's also difficult to accept yourself if nobody else accepts you, It's not impossible, in the best of worlds, you would be able to accept yourself without needing the approval of others. But it's hard. It's hard being alone in that and being so different from everybody else and outside of the norm. And you're hiding this and keeping this to yourself, and it really sucks, So there's all that. Then there's also, I then talked about how I was at the Christmas market, in that we were at the Christmas market before we ended up going to this cafe, which is Griska Huset. Really recommend. Best hot chocolate. And it was during Black Friday, and it was the first of Advent as well, and it was at the Old Town Christmas Market in Stockholm, the most crowded Christmas market. So I got overwhelmed, and I said that I wanted to sit to the side, and I this was before I had come out as autistic to ENTP friend. But my ENTP friend could tell that something was off. So he was like, if you faint, we can help you because we're doctors, which was funny. But yeah, we ended up sitting down. So I told my friends, well, see, by knowing that I was autistic, I was able to accommodate myself and to leave the situation. And my ISFJ friend said, oh yeah, before you would have probably just like started crying out of nowhere, because he said that I used to do that. And now that I, am able to like be present instead, or like leave the situation if I need to. And we talked about like how we gained social skills, and so that we were able to fit in. But that's that it takes a lot of energy out of us, that it doesn't come naturally. But that we are able to do it is a positive thing, because it does help us, give us opportunities and stuff. Our ability to mask is a strategy, even if it's not always a good strategy, it is a strategy when you don't have any other strategies, and yeah, it's important to fit in sometimes, even if it sucks that you have to do that. So yeah, that was interesting. And then we ended up, they ended up going home, and then I ended up going to my ENFJ friend's party, which was a bingo, and I only knew another person there. People from all over the world, really interesting people. However, I saw that my ENFJ friend was kind of like absent sometimes during the party, which hosts often are, they have a lot of things to do. But I saw that she was also getting more and more stressed throughout the party. And I'll make a separate video about ENFJ versus INFP, ADHD versus autism, because she has ADHD. But she started, she was really into people pleasing the whole night. And one of the things that happened is that she was asking everybody like what music we should have. And she came to me and she was like, oh, what music should we have? And I was like, well, what kind of music should we have? What's the mood here? And she was like, yeah, well, somebody said that they wanted to dance. And I'm like, but I don't know what music they want to dance to. And I said, well, what music do you want to play? I said, you said that you had a playlist. And she's like, yeah, but actually I don't want any music. I'm like, well, why are you asking us which music we should play if you don't want any music? And yeah, she said, oh yes, this stresses me a lot. I'm like, yeah, you seem stressed. It ends up that then she had these plans, these grand visions of what the party would be, and the next part would be in her apartment. And I was like, I actually have to leave in a half hour because I'm going to be homeless if I miss the last train, which is in a half hour. So I can take a glass of mulled wine and like, that's it. We were having a great time. We had waffles and stuff, but my ENFJ friend was not having a good time. I could tell that her mask was like brittle. I don't know how to explain it better. But like on the surface, it seemed like everything was going great in her mind, but I could tell that it wasn't, but she kept the mask on and everything. And then I went upstairs and I could tell that she was even more frazzled than before. And she was like, you know how my house looks like, right? I could let you in, right? And I was like, I guess. I've seen, you know how I'm messy. And she said, well, yeah, you've seen my other apartments and stuff. And I'm like, yeah, but it's fine. She's like, yeah, but this is more messy than usual. And I'm like, it's okay. And that's when I saw that she was like about to break. And I was like, I don't know what came into me, but I said, you know that my parents are hoarders, right? I don't know why I'd said that. That was like the wrong thing to say, but she was like, oh, I thought that she knew, really, I did. I thought that I told her this, but she then started crying and she was like, no, I didn't know. And she was like, oh, but we can't talk about this right now. Can we leave this to tomorrow? And we ended up not talking about it after that. But I told her, like, you can trust me, I've seen terrible houses, you know? It's okay. And so, okay, so she opened the door. She had a friend who was sleeping over there, so she was taking a nap, who was also a very close friend of hers. But the point is that she wanted everybody else at the party who was left to come to her apartment to maybe dance. I don't know. And so, and I was like, she started crying, and we were both, me and that her friend were like patting her on the back and like, you know, motivating her and stuff. And I was like, do you really feel like you want to invite all of these people into your house when you are so stressed about even me seeing your place? And you look really tired. And she was like, yeah, no, I've been hiding and being all glad and happy all day, but I don't feel that way. And I was like, yeah. But yeah, so she ended up, I ended up finding out later that she had a big breakdown after I left. But I didn't know that at the time. I only had 10 minutes before I really had to leave. I ended up, you know, excusing myself, and it felt awful because she was in the middle of a breakdown. But I really had to leave. And she was like, oh, I wish that you could stay over. And I was like, no, if I stay over, I will just be a burden for your emotional state right now, you know? It's not that I don't want to stay because of the state of the apartment, like that's fine. The thing that's not fine is that you are stretching yourself too thin on so many people and trying so hard to just be a certain kind of person, you know? I didn't tell her that, but, you know, I think that she understood this. And then I had to go. Like, I had 5 minutes left, and I had to catch the subway to catch a train, and I caught the train with 1 minute. Like, I ran across the central station in Stockholm. I made it, but wow. I was worried for a moment there that I wouldn't have a place to sleep. But yeah, so I told her, like, I have to set a boundary right now. Like we said, if you're going to set boundaries to people, I need to also set my boundary now. I need to go. But it felt terrible, you know, having to leave at that point. But what I did find was really good is that she felt that she could disclose about this certain hidden life that leads behind closed doors, you know. And you know, later on, after a lot of stuff happened, she ended up saying, Ingrid, I adopt you as a sister of light because you saved me there. And I was like, I didn't do anything, you know. But she said, you know, like, it's important to be authentic, to be yourself. And you always let me be myself. And yeah, I think it's very important with authenticity. That's what I live for. Unfortunately, because of me masking my entire life, it's been hard to be my authentic self. I think part of it is that has saved me a little bit is that uniqueness has been a part of my identity in a way. Like I've known that I was never going to really fit in. like even from birth, like I wasn't born in the country that I grew up in. I was born in Sweden and I grew up in France, and I was always aware of that difference because my parents were not French. So since I've always been aware that I was different from other people. This, regardless of the autism, regardless of being INFP, I was different. So I kind of had to accept that forever. And I would disclose that. That was part of my identity, as being from other countries and speaking different languages. So I've always been okay with that, but it's for the other identities that are maybe not as accepted in society. That's where it gets tricky, and you can't trust everyone with that kind of information. And it's hard sometimes to, have the gut feeling of who is okay to disclose to. Because like with my ENFJ friend, then she had to make the decision of, was she going to show up her apartment to the other people or not? Either she didn't and saved her, her mental health by, realizing when too much was too much, which is an admirable choice. Another admirable choice is to go against your fears and to show everybody your apartment at the risk of somebody like really rejecting you, which had happened to her before. That she'd had some boyfriend over and some ex to apartment, and then he rejected her due to the state of the apartment. So yeah, this pretty clear traumatic moments there. But yeah, I've had a traumatic moment coming out to a friend who wasn't a friend, and we talked about the famous like cliche quote, like those who mind don't matter, those who matter don't mind. That's what my ENFJ friend, like I reminded my ENFJ friend of. And yeah, I think that's a very INFP quote. But it does take a lot of courage. But sometimes you don't need to be courageous, because sometimes you just need to survive and fit in. And so there's always this back and forth, of like what is safe and what is necessary and what would be good to reveal, because disclosure, even though I do the terrible thing of oversharing, disclosure is a way to connect with people. And I'll talk about it more in my ENFJ versus INFP video, which will be coming, I guess, at some point. I've already made a video like that, but I'm doing it again with the new insights that I got from this moment. But yeah, by disclosing, you're opening the door for other people to disclose and harmonize with you, and if you always keep up walls, you're not going to be able to connect to anybody if you always have the door closed. But if you have your doors wide open, then you invite toxic people into your life, which is basically kind of what happened to my ENFJ friend, is that she hadn't been sleeping in her own bed for apparently 2 days before this. So being sleep deprived does not help your mental state. And so this person who was toxic would not leave her apartment. And so basically, you have to be careful about how much you are willing to trust certain people. And so she had disclosed the state of our apartments to this person who was kind of shaming her about the state of our apartment, which, not a good situation. So you have to be clever and wise about who you let in and who you don't. But you need to let some people in if you have those people, if you can, to let go of some of that weight of hiding who you are all the time. But it's not always possible. That's the problem. Sometimes you are just surrounded by people who don't care or don't understand or don't want to understand. Sometimes you're surrounded by nobody. Basically, you don't have anybody. So I know it's hard. And it's okay to be in the closet. It's okay to be to never discuss your ADHD with anybody else if you feel like that's not going to be conducive to any extra help. But in a better world, you wouldn't need to hide so much of who you were all the time. And I think it's important with authenticity. You can keep your privacy while still being authentic with certain people. Now, I kind of break all of these rules by having a YouTube channel, that is public, that anybody can see. But somehow I'm okay with sharing these things on the internet rather than certain people in my real life. It's an interesting thing that I haven't figured that one out yet. It doesn't feel like I'm talking to that many people when I'm just talking to a camera. But maybe I'm disclosing way too much, and maybe like the CIA is going to come and get me. I don't know. But at the moment I feel comfortable in my state of disclosure in the way that I am right now. So tell me what you guys think about disclosing, being open about sharing of yourself versus hiding yourself and masking. Both parts are important. Neither is totally good or totally bad. You need a balance of both. But it's hard to strike that balance for everybody. So have a great day, everybody. Bye.